preconceived notions when you're going fishing. Let's just think about this. All week long you're at work, you're sitting there, you're daydreaming about, you know, your fishing trip that weekend, and you're expecting to catch them a certain way. You've got every rod rigged up to do what you think they're gonna do. You get to the lake and you go do that and it doesn't work. Well, while that's not working, be thinking about how the conditions are set up for that day. Try something new, adventure out to some new areas and see what you can't learn.
Well, it's a good winter morning and we're at Fayette County. You know, Fayette is a place I like to spend a lot of time at during the winter. It's a power plant lake. There's several of them across Texas and across the nation, and water's always warmer here. Fish can be a little more aggressive and want to bite. We've got a little bit of fog on the water right now. Sun's just come up. We're gonna throw a jerkbait and crank down the dam here a little bit and see if we just can't get bit. Well, that was a light bite. I'm not even sure it's a bass. Not coming up. Nope, it's a bass. I could see on my live scope down there that most of those fish were in about 7-8 foot of water down closer to those rocks. So I kind of put the jerkbait up for a second. It didn't take long to probably the 15th cast. And you know, this one here, I'm actually throwing 10-pound sniper to really get this Little John MD all the way down to where it's ticking those rocks. This is one of my favorite crankbaits, and I like to keep one with about 14-pound test. Well, he ate it. And one with, you know, one at 10 to give me a little bit more depth and a little bit more action.
You know, in that situation, running to the dam, I had some jerkbaits tied off, and I'm thinking, man, the conditions are perfect to catch those fish, probably up there on a jerkbait around those rocks. And I pull in, I tie it on. I'm starting down an area that I've got a lot of bites in the past, and I kind of look around with my live scope and I can see some fish out there, and I'm throwing that jerkbait, and I've thrown it about 15, maybe 20 times, and I hadn't had a bite. And I felt like I should be getting a bite. So I dropped it down, picked up one of my old favorite crankbaits, the SPRO Little John MD. Said that word a million times on our shows, and I start winding it. And it wasn't long until I started loading up on fish. There's one. I didn't get a very good hook set into that one. Little bitty guy. He hit it coming towards me. I think we got another hook into him now. Thank you for the good bite. Another fatty. Gotta have pliers when you do this stuff. That's fun. Little tanks, little fat tanks. Go back in there and grow up. You know, when you look at this type of a presentation, I mean, it's about as an easy a way, in my opinion, to, you know, to fish, but I'm looking at live scope to be able to kind of get a depth that I like so I can stay out there in 7-8 foot. I've got my traditional sonar on. I've got my mapping on to kind of look at the depth, and, you know, just trying to keep my bait in that zone that not only this bait's gonna work the best, but that I feel like the fish are gonna be in as well. And that allows, you know, but really I'm paralleling this bait. You know, a lot of times you'll see people out throwing in, and that works great in certain situations, but right now, what I see on my electronics tells me most of these fish are just kind of in this one little zone, and I want to keep my bait in that zone as long as I can. If I'm throwing from this way into here, I'm not in that zone very long. So this way I'm being more efficient as I kind of position my boat and make long casts along these rocks. Bounced off an old rock. Clone to the other ones. Come here. I mean, I hit that rock. We've done that a couple times today, and it just, right when it deflected. What happens with a crankbait when it hits those rocks is that, you know, it's been tracking one way the whole way. It's coming like this. All of a sudden it hits that rock and it deflects. And, you know, if there's a bass laying right there, it triggers a reaction strike. And exactly what happened right there when I hit that rock. It just, you know, I felt that bait bounce off of it, and you know, you're instinctively going to pump your rod or move it, and it just, everything throws different action, and there's another one, generates a strike. Well, that one was just out at the end of those rocks. I didn't hit anything on that one. Just out there chasing bait. He's mean. We got up here where we saw all those, the herons and the cormorants up in here, probably running shad or something at the end of the day. You never know all of the answers, but that's what we think probably happened on him. Just a good solid bite that we don't ever turn down. Let's throw back in the same direction. Let's back to back in the same area. The first one was a lot shallower than that last one.
It's time now for the first break in the show. With the weather changing and bass starting to set up in a different manner, Wade goes up shallow to flip reeds with the SPRO CJ Flip Jig. Stay tuned here to see some great fish catching action.
You know, after cranking for a while, I knew I needed to get back to kind of, you know, doing the things I had came there for. And that was to spend some time flipping a jig, making some content on the new SPRO CJ Flip Jig. This is a great looking jig designed by Chris Johnson. It's got a great lively action skirt. The weed guard on it is perfectly set up to where you're not having to trim anything. I really like the head and the way it's designed with the way the hook lays in there to be able to work up north for you're catching smallmouth or you're flipping big largemouth down south. And I hadn't really spent a lot of time flipping this jig. I have caught a lot of fish up Fayette in the reeds, and I was a little bit disappointed as I was running around looking. There wasn't as much water on those reeds as there normally is. I kind of felt like, man, there's going to be a few places I can catch them, and I started flipping that jig, and that's one of my favorite ways to catch fish. I feel like every flip you should get a bite when you're doing this. It should be a bass on every one of these. Sometimes though, the water can get so high, these fish get back behind all these cattails and they'll spawn in there, and you'll even see on somebody's water where people will pull their boat up on top of it to get back in there and really pick some of this stuff apart when they're spawning. And there should be, 60-something degrees, you would think there could be some spawning when you can find cattails like this. Oh God, that's a good one. Come here. There we go. That's what I like about flipping right there. That's an old big one. I've taken that jig and was just kind of swimming it through the top of those reeds right there, and that big old tank just come up and swallowed it right out of the top of those. And I mean, my comments were bigging right away. That was a good one. You know, flipping and pitching for me, it kind of probably goes back to my youth and fishing in Oklahoma, where we spent a lot of time in the dirt flipping bushes and laydowns and things along those lines. And I could just do it for hours just to get 5 bites. Now, I gotta say I get a little more antsy nowadays, and I probably want to do things faster, but when I can get a bite flipping in short line, whether I'm using braided line or fluorocarbon, it just, man, when you see that line jump or you feel it and you crank back and you feel one tugging, it is an awesome fight. I always thought the jig gets a lot more big bites, bigger, bulkier profile than say a Texas rig does in the same situation. And you know, I keep them pretty honest when I'm flipping this kind of stuff. I have them both rigged up a lot of times, but when they're on the jig, it's, you know, just the way it's designed, I think your hookup ratio is really good. You can kind of swim it a little bit more through this type of a cover, especially, and generate some reaction bites as they come across it. And the line tie on this particular bait is set up in a situation that kind of allows you to get a really good fall and get it through some of this cover. And that's always been a popular thing when you look at jigs. It's kind of an archy style jig head, and they just really, you know, the jig doesn't, you know, and all these craziness of people fishing offshore now a lot more, the jig has kind of become a forgotten technique a lot of times in shallow water, and it is still as deadly, and the big ones still bite it just as good. Another fish that came with the jig kind of hanging out over the reeds the way he was right there. What a cool bite. That never gets old, especially when you hook them right like that. They eat your jig like that. Thump, thump. I love that bite. One of my favorites, and always will be. You know, when you're reading the water and reading conditions, you get a calm day and the cattails aren't moving, water temperature 60 degrees, you know, they should be in those reeds, either spawning or setting up to it, feeding, and you're kind of going around flipping and pitching a jig or a soft plastic Texas rig. It's an exciting bite. You know, I've had days where I've had 20, 25 flipping bites, and I've had days where I've had half a dozen, but when I get a bite flipping and pitching, it's an awesome feeling. Come here, big guy. Boy, these fish are fat, chunky in this cover. You know, anytime you go on a multi-day fishing trip, you've got to expect the conditions and the weather to change. It's probably going to happen more often than not. The weather change might be rain, it might be a cold front, it might be a warm-up, it might be high winds, it might be a change in the wind direction. So as a fisherman, we've always got to kind of be on our toes. And I mean, literally watching the weather forecast as the day goes on can even be important to understand how fish move. On this particular trip, we had a cold front rolling in on the second day of it, and we had caught them cranking, we'd caught them flipping, but now the conditions had totally changed. It was cloudy, it was windy, the temperature was a lot lower.
Yeah, boy, look at that right there. You can really see the defined edges of all that eel grass. Comes out, sets up, how it's setting up. You know, those are things you look out there, it doesn't look like there's anything. You look here and you start to see all that and how it's coming in at that 6 foot of water. It gives you a good idea on where to hold your boat, and then as you look at your live scope coming down through here, it'll help you keep lined up with it. That's a fish right there. Let's see if we can catch one. Drop the power poles right here. I mean, we were literally just coming over that, and you can kind of see all that as we went on our side where all that came out, and that little guy right there came right off of it. Little Chatterbomber. You know, when you get a windy, cold, cloudy day, water temperatures are 50 to 58, it's a great time to go winding. And by winding, I talk about maybe a lipless crankbait, a Chatterbomb, something like that you can wind out over grass and see how many fish you can get to react to it. There's one. Caught that one on the fall. You know, this style of bait is famous for that pumping action and, you know, kind of pulling it. And I have caught a lot of fish in my life just pulling it, and it just kind of falls down. And in my mind, you're a big guy. You think you're big, and in my mind, this bait is just kind of fluttering down like that. Got a lot of side by side, you know, going in like a jig. And
it just gets heavy a lot of times when you kind of pick up the slack. It's definitely a bait. I mean, you can certainly wind it, but I do pause it and pull it and do different things with it. And I've seen days where I've caught a lot more of them on that fall, and I've seen days where I've caught them kind of ripping it like that out of the grass. So you gotta let the fish tell you what they want.
We've reached our final break in the show. Coming up next, Wade continues to catch cold weather pre-spawn bass.
I'm up here. He's been eating well.
Keep it tuned here for more.
Biggin. Drop our power pole. Oh, this is a good one here. I mean, I caught this one on the pause. Golly, he's mad. Stay hooked up, big old fish. Gosh, this is such a deadly technique this time of the year and a great bait. God, look how far down he's got that Chatterbomb. That bait is down in there. Come here, buddy. Pretty old fish. It's been living in the grass right there. Gosh, I mean, that's your prototypical pausing the bait, and that sucker, boom, as it was falling down in there. What a pretty fish. God, that's so awesome. I love that bite at this time of the year. It's just, I like that kind of bite any time of the year, but you know, you're throwing it out there, you can see all the grass on the electronics, you can feel it, and you pull through a clump or you pause it by it and you just, boom, and just stop. And you get that load up feeling, and there he is. Gosh, that was a good one. He put on a show. Jumping and tugging. I want to do it again now. Reading those conditions, I mean, sometimes you hit it right, sometimes you get nothing, and you're just casting blindly around everywhere you go, trying to figure out how to get a bite. But once you get a couple of bites and you can kind of dial in a little bit, it helps you understand how to position your boat, what to look for more and more, and be repetitive. I think that's one of the hardest things for fishermen to do a lot of times, me exactly, is understand, process what that bite was, process how to get that same kind of bite again, and put my boat in the same positions. Oh gosh, daggone biggin. Right at the boat. Ah, he's not that big, he's only 2.5 pounds. Man, I mean, that fish was taking the bait out of the boat, out of the water when that one bit. You know, that's what happens when you're fishing around grass. Well, it could happen anywhere, but fishing around grass, it definitely can happen. They're waiting at an ambush point, and he's waiting at an ambush point. He's got a big old gash in him, or I bet a cormorant got him. I was picking that bait, I mean, literally out of the water, and whap! First thing out of my mouth was biggin. He wasn't that big. When they bite you with 5 foot of line out, they sure feel like they should all be big. You know, when you plan to fish multiple days or a long 10-hour day, I think you got to be prepared more often than not, especially in the spring, for weather changes. Those weather changes are going to impact the fishing. You know, if you have from cold to hot, hot to cold, winds changing directions, big thunderstorms, all those can impact how the fish set up. But if you kind of understand where the fish should be, where they should go, I'm a big believer, and I said this a lot, fish don't swim to the dam and leave the pocket. They're gonna stay in that pocket. You just gotta figure out how they're set up and what to throw in front of them to trigger a bite. A decent little bass, decent bass. All of them are good at the end of the day. I'm up here. He's been eating well. God, I love these green looking ones. That hook just fell out. Such a fun way to catch them in the wintertime, in the springtime, in the summertime, doesn't matter when it is. Wind it, pause it, put a different trailer on it, lots of different colors that you can mimic. Bluegill, you can mimic crawfish like I am today, shad, whatever you want to do. Just a deadly bait to catch them.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Bass Pro Shops Fisherman's Handbook. This has been a Carico TV production.